But if you look at the varsity hockey team, and you came to some games, as many of us here did, you would notice two young men that were doing things that weren't majestic, weren't grandiose, didn't represent, it didn't seem gvura, but something rather modest, something rather humble. You'd see our salutatorian, Shlomo Friedman. You'd see Shlomo taking photos of the game, being a photographer for the Academy News, humbly going about his business, when at his core, he was a Yarei Shemayim, diligent student, broad-minded individual who sees that the Borei Olam is not just the author of revelation, but also the author of creation, and that everything in this world has significance. So you'd see our salutatorian taking photos. The second young man, our class valedictorian, Natan Beanstalk. Natan Beanstalk, diligent, serious, with an edge, was our backup goalie, and went about his business every game, supporting the team, cheering the team on, knowing that he was the backup goalie in an unassuming and understated way, but had such power of intellect and such sharpness of mind that his playing field of ideas, of Talmud Torah, of Avodas Hashem, was where his majesty and his humility would find itself. It gives me great pleasure to call Shlomo Friedman to deliver our salutatorian address.
Bereshus Rabbi Gottlieb, Mr. Sklar, Mrs. Goldberg, Rebbeim, faculty, parents, and fellow graduates. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Naso, we are introduced to the Nazir, a man or woman who takes an oath of separation. The Torah tells us that this Nazir must abstain from eating any grape product, must not cut his hair, or become impure through contact with a corpse, even for his or her parents. Because of these prohibitions, the Nazir is compared to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is also not allowed to become impure. Furthermore, the pasuk refers to the Nazir as having Nezer Elokav al Rosho, the crown of God, on his head. But what is so special about the Nazir that he warrants such a title? He is merely abstaining from 3 prohibitions, and yet he is compared to a Kohen Gadol. Rav Mordechai Gifter explains that the greatness of the Nazir is not that he abstains from drinking wine, cutting hair, or becoming impure. Rather, the greatness of the Nazir is in his decision to become a Nazir. Chazal tell us that the Parsha of Sota is juxtaposed to the Parsha of Nazir to teach us that whoever saw the ordeal of a Sota should take an oath to become a Nazir. The prominence of the Nazir is that he stopped to think for a second about events transpiring before him, that he contemplated their meaning, and that he decided to change. The Nazir's actions are small, but they are practical, realistic, and full of personal meaning. Throughout our lives, our parents, grandparents, friends, and educators have enabled us to have this sixth sense, this ability to discern meaning in the mundane, and for this we owe them our eternal thanks and gratitude. 2 individuals, Rabbi Gottlieb and Mr. Sklar, have allowed us to actualize this message And though they graduate with us tonight, we know that MTA will continue its path of excellence. It's hard to imagine that it was 4 years ago when we started MTA. It feels like just yesterday that it was a beautiful June day, much like today, actually. We were on the Beast, rocketing at 30 miles per hour on the Hudson, getting soaked, wondering what MTA would be like. And then all of a sudden, high school's over, and we're here wearing caps and gowns. I'm left wondering how we got here. And then I start to think of all that has occurred during our 4 years here, both in and out of the classroom. Like at the freshman's Shabbaton, Donnie Gopstein's Dvar Torah. Shakespeare plays in Mrs. Levitt's class. Dr. Dan's English class. Hi, Dr. Dan. The Makor Chaim experience. Playing mini basketball at Camp Monroe for 3 years. Ring Homestead in that ropes course with that jump we all made. Those crazy MHL games during lunch. Sarachek, MTA versus ULA. The hockey championship. Our memorable senior breakfast. And our epic senior trip, which never had a dull moment. But also remember the small moments, just hanging out with friends during breakfast or lunch, or just having a great time in class. Remembering the teachers we've had each year and what they've taught us. These events and memories serve as anchors in time, and are stories that we will always share and remember. Stories that will never fail to bring smiles to our faces. And now, once one starts to reminisce and reflect about what has transpired, a sense of time and purpose emerges, and that we are able to gain an appreciation for these past events. When we reflect on the past, it also gives us a sense of where we are, but also where we need to be. MTA has emphasized that our goal here is to draw close to God and His teachings. But it is not enough to just recognize this fact. One must, like the Nazir, take an active stance to improve. We must act as Rabbi Akiva when he realized that even he, a 40-year-old man, could begin to learn Torah. When he saw how the perpetual dripping of water on the rock eventually shaped the rock. Rabbi Akiva was so taken by this common sight, it changed his life and the course of Judaism as he eventually became the leader of his generation. This last part, taking action, is the most difficult because it is entirely a byproduct of your own inspired will and conviction. As we end this time in our lives, a new one begins. Whether it's college or Israel, this new era brings the potential for growth and development. May our reflections on the past allow us to achieve in the future. Thank you.
Birshus, Rabbi Gottlieb, Mr. Sklar, Mrs. Goldberg, Rebbeim, faculty, parents, and fellow graduates. I have often wondered why there are so many minhagim on Shavuos. Why do we eat dairy, stay up all night learning, and even decorate the shul with flowers? When I ask this question, I'm usually told that this is all done to help remember Matan Torah. But how does following these minhagim affect my memory of Matan Torah? How can performing actions affect my ability to remember anything? I think the answer lies in this week's Parsha, Parshas Naso. Naso teaches us a lot about the value of actions and their ability to change our mindset. In discussing Nazir and Sota, the Torah tells us that our actions can change our way of thinking. The Nazir wants to feel closer to Hashem. So the Torah tells him that the way to do so is to refrain from drinking wine and cutting his hair. But why is this the best method of clinging to Hashem? Why should he not spend his time thinking about Hashem and his greatness? Wouldn't that also make him feel closer to Hashem? The Torah is teaching us that it is through our actions that we are able to change our mindset and become closer to Hashem. Even though we may believe that we can just think about Hashem's greatness and feel closer to him, the best way to actually achieve our goal is through our actions. The case of Sota is a little harder to understand. A woman, after being warned by her husband and two Eidim not to seclude herself in a room with another man, does so anyway. The husband then forces the woman to go through the long Sota process, which culminates with her drinking the Sota waters. This is because her husband suspects that she was having relations with the other man, and if she was, the waters would reveal what occurred. But why should she have to go through the long and embarrassing Sota process? What did she do wrong? Her husband doesn't know that she was having relations with the other man. For all he knows, she could have wanted the privacy to buy him a gift. So why does she have to go through the Sota process? I think we can answer this question based on what we said by Nazir. The Nazir uses his actions to shape his thoughts, but it really goes both ways. Your actions also explain your thoughts and intentions. By secluding herself with another man, she causes her husband to suspect her of impropriety. There's a saying that acharei ha'peulos nimshachim halavavos, that the heart follows your actions. This is what is happening by Sota. The action of secluding herself causes her husband to believe that she was behaving improperly, and as a punishment for revealing her intentions to him, she has to go through the Sota process. Another example of this idea is an incident I remember from Dr. Berliner's calculus class. Dr. Berliner told us on the first day that we had to do our homework, but he wouldn't check on us, because he would be able to know when we didn't do our homework. I wondered what the point of doing the work was, if he wasn't going to check it anyway. But now I realize that he was testing our dedication to the class. By doing the homework, we would prove to ourselves that we cared about the class, and that is how he would know who was doing the work. He would be able to tell who did the work based on who showed a devotion to his class, because our actions reveal our intentions. I think we can apply the same idea to Shavuos. The reason that we have all of the minhagim is that they help shape our thoughts. While we may be able to remember Matan Torah without any special activities, the minhagim show that we want to remember Matan Torah and help us to do so. That is why we have all of the minhagim, because they actually do help us commemorate Matan Torah. We are able to see how our actions can shape our thoughts in MTA itself. Rabbi Gottlieb and Mr. Sklar have set an example for their school with the active leadership that they have. Mr. Sklar usually is a more behind-the-scenes role than Rabbi Gottlieb, but he accompanies the students on the international missions, most recently last year to Poland. Mr. Sklar serves as the guide on these trips and then explains to the school, along with the students, the significance of these missions. I remember when Mr. Sklar held an assembly after the mission to Poland, and he had the students and speak about their trip. This had a large impact on my MTA experience, as I was able to realize what Jewish life was like in Poland and how fortunate we were to be in MTA. Rabbi Gottlieb's influence can be seen in the opening remarks he delivers every year. I still remember the speech he gave 3 years ago. He discussed the film The Dark Knight and related the Joker's cynical view of leadership to the view of leadership espoused in Parshas Shoftim. Rabbi Gottlieb warned us not to fall into the trap of cynicism, a message that we still strive to achieve. Thanks for being great role models for us, and we wish you success in the future. In addition to Mr. Sklar and Rabbi Gottlieb, the entire faculty at MTA are role models for the entire student body. Aside from their work in the classroom, we are able to see our teachers partaking in chagigas and assemblies. Their enthusiasm influences all of their students, and we thank you for teaching us and for always being there to help. I would also like to thank my parents for setting a great example for my brothers and me to follow. Through their volunteer work and coaching our sports teams, they have shown their intentions for us and set the bar for us to follow. Thanks for always being there and for setting a great example. And finally, to my fellow graduates. We have achieved a great deal in our 4 years at MTA. We've won debates, reached the Sarachek finals, and even won a hockey championship. We've seen how our actions have helped us become better people and improve our school. We have bonded over senior trip and become really close friends. My hope is that in the future, our actions will continue to have tremendous effects wherever we go and help us bring Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your evening.